Hey, am I audible?
Yeah, you can be heard.
Cool. So I prefer the POIs in the chat, or if you have your cameras open, you just raise your hand. That's even better, as the chat is pretty small. Okay, cool, guys. I'll start in three, two, one. Seeds of change sown from within. I want to be very clear. The cost of living is not just losing all the benefits of working within the regime, like expanding your career, but it's actively turning yourself into an enemy of the regime. The setup for the debate is clear. We're going to weigh up the actor's interest in this debate. You care roughly about three things. You care about your safety, you care about your career, and you care about your country, more or less. But note that your safety is far more important than your career and your country, insofar as it's a precondition for everything else. If you are in a jail, if you are recluded, if you are in a place where you cannot study, or if you are dead, logically, your agency to help your country and so on and so forth is severely limited, if not completely obliterated on their side. So that's why proving safety, it's a precondition for the rest of the clashes in this round. We're going to prove many things in this debate. Let's start with why is it dangerous to leave? Many mechanisms here. Number one, you're actively denying an offer from the regime. And this is important because the regime had an interest in you, which means that initially, at the start of this debate, you are somewhat, if not very important for this regime. They are willing to offer you not any job, but a relevant job as an advisor. So turning that down means that you are putting active pressure on this regime. Now they need to find someone else. Now they feel like you, for some reason, don't like the regime, especially because the alternative is not just turning them down and recommending them a friend, but it's actively leaving and starting your career in another country. This is very, very bad because probably they will try to coerce you back to the country. They will do things like threaten you and threaten your family and your safety to make sure that you stay at all cost, even if you leave, right? They're going to try to use their influence in other countries to make sure that no good countries want to receive you in their frontiers, right? They're going to try to make sure that those countries don't give you things like protection. Even in those countries, they probably have small groups that they can finance in order to terror you, in order to make sure that you don't live a happy life or that your family doesn't live a happy life, so that you never forget that you turned out the regime, which is something that they needed in the first place. So that's just from the get-go. But even if this doesn't occur and the regime just says, okay, you can leave, it's okay, fine, we don't care, you don't live a good life in another country for many reasons. For starters, the country that you go to probably doesn't have a great incentive to protect you because you come from a country that's an authoritarian country. This raises many, many red flags, right? If you're a scientist, if you're a nuclear scientist from Iran, when you go to countries in the West, even if those countries don't know for sure that you are a spy or that you work for the regime, they probably suspect, right? Why is this person leaving? Does this person work with the government before? What are their connections to the government? So they probably have an incentive to at least exclude you from certain spaces at best, but at worst, not provide you protection or actively do things like treat you badly, which is pretty, pretty bad. That means that the prejudice that those countries has is actively bad for your safety. Now, let's take a look at the comparative, which is fairly simple, right? Protection on our side. Number one, you do have some leverage and can negotiate good conditions with the regime, right? Because they offered you an important job. That's at the start of this debate. That means that you can probably trade things like living in the safest parts of the country. You can trade things like your family also living there, your family members living there, your friends living there. You can do plenty of things to make sure that they're safe. You can probably hire or make sure that the government, the regime hires, I don't know, private chefs, private taxis for your family so that you can make sure that they're completely safe 24/7, which is pretty, pretty important. But number two, the regime has an incentive to keep you. So this is expansive over time. Note that to the extent that you've been working for them 1 or 2 years, you already know too much information, right? So to that point, they need to offer you better and better conditions moving on to the future, because that's the only way to make sure that you stay within the regime. So that's important, right? You become more and more indispensable as time passes. But secondly, they trust you more, right? Because you've done actively good things for the regime. So that means that they probably offer you good conditions. But a final mechanism about protection on their side, which also impacts on this person's individual happiness, which I think it's important in this debate, is that if you go overseas, you probably leave alone, right? Because you're escaping the country. It's very hard that you can do this with your family, but even if you can, you probably are not taking everybody. So you still feel guilty that you're leaving some people that are important to you within the country. This proves massive impacts. Your life is safer on our side. The people that you care about are safer on our side. You are more calmed in our side. You have more peace and ease of mind, which is very, very important. Now, I want to be very clear on the next clash, which is the academic career. With the level of respect that you have within the regime, they can probably do things like finance you further studies, right? If you have a bachelor's, you can probably get a master's. If you had a master's, they're going to probably finance you becoming a doctor in whatever field you're studying. They can probably finance access to you to get to better academic circles, even if they don't have access to, let's say, the Western liberal democratic academics. You probably do have access to the smartest people available in political terms for people of your country. This means that you can do significant improvements in your career exclusively on our side, because when you go to another side, to another country, you're probably not as important in terms of your career. You're not the biggest intellectual there, so it's just more likely in our side that you get those benefits. I'll take closing.
Okay, but if you ask for more money by the government, can they just kill you and hire an expert from China, for example?
No, that doesn't sound very likely, right? It doesn't sound like a very smart thing to do. I hope you never run a country as a dictator, because you probably crush it very soonly, right? That doesn't work because, one, it raised massive red flags, and it's very unpopular to do this. Two, moving on to the future, it is important for them to keep you. They have an initial interest in you, and you probably know things already, so it's important for them to keep you alive in our side. I think that responds quite well. Now, finally, I want to mention something. It is not clear that this actor is a progressive, leftist, woke debater, okay? So it is not clear that he does care about his country and about his citizens. Opposition has to prove that. I don't think they have enough information to do so. So they cannot just say, you're going to work for a regime that's bad. You will feel very bad because they're not democratic. No, we don't know that. You cannot assume it. But even if you can assume it, I'll say in opening government that you have more control and more agency over what policies your country implements when you work within it. Jorge will be more profound, so that even if opposition proves that ridiculous characterization, we still win in opening government. Extremely proud to propose. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the Prime Minister for that fine speech, and now at the Leader of the Opposition to begin the op case in this debate. Hear, hear.
Just 1 second. Okay, so I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1, and go. So I'm going to start by rebutting one of the main points of the speech, which was that you will be in active danger if you choose to stay in if you choose to leave the authoritarian regime, and then tell you integrated why actually on our side you're likely to leave a safer life, and that's why you should vote opposition. So starting off, what have we gotten from we've gotten this idea that, okay, you will be actively threatened by the regime. Why? So first of all, we don't believe this is necessarily true that the regime will put so many resources in getting you back, because it says in the info slide that you're known locally, not nationally. So you might be important in a very small community, but not enough for a national government to care about you, stuff like that. Okay, so they're not likely to expend crazy amounts of resources to make your life bad, because why? So, and then there's two options. Either you don't have any information about the regime, which is most likely, because at this point you're not a researcher, you're just a researcher, you're not working for the government yet. So you likely don't know a lot about what is going on the inside of the regime, in which case the regime has literally no reason to hunt you down, because there's people fleeing authoritarian regimes all the time, and they're not even fleeing, usually they're just leaving. You can leave China, you can leave Russia. Most authoritarian regimes you can just leave, and even the ones you have to escape, like North Korea, like people manage to do that. Second, or you do have very minimal information on the regime, in which case, okay, they might expend some resources on getting you back, but in that case, you're likely to be able to get protection from governments that oppose that regime for the information that you do have. So how will you get safety in the countries that you flee to? So most liberal democratic countries have programs that protect political refugees. This is amazing because usually they offer you protection programs. They offer you, like a place to stay. They give you a lot of resources because you count as a refugee and you have international rights to, protection. And likely, why do we think this is likely? Also because authoritarian states usually have ideological enemies, and those enemies also want to fuck the authoritarian states. So they're very likely to want to help you escape those. So now, moving on to our main case. So let me characterize the actor a bit for you. So the actor is an academic, and academics choose their career because they have a commitment to the pursuit of truth, right? Academics like learning, they like knowing new things, they want to know these new things, right? Okay, so that means that they have chosen this field because the pursuit of knowledge makes them happy. This is very important because the authoritarian state likely goes against the pursuit of knowledge. Let me tell you why. So authoritarian states usually have a very clear agenda with public policy. They're usually surveillance states. They often have no freedom of press and no freedom of thought because that's how they used to control the population under an authoritarian state. You need that to be able to control everybody, right? So we think for all of these reasons, the intrinsic motivations of the actor, which we can know, maybe he doesn't care about democracy, but he does care about the pursuit of truth, are in direct conflict with the setup of an authoritarian state. Okay, why is this important? Because what is your life likely to look like in the authoritarian state? So we think that, you might get a high reward because you're like a government agent, yada, 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 but it's very, very high risk. Why is this true? So first of all, if you're asked to do something that like conflicts with your moral views, so we don't think that necessarily every time you're going to be asked to do this, but there may be a certain point where your human morality tells you not to do something that the authoritarian states want you to do. In that situation, either you don't do it, in which case you're going to be hunted down, you're likely going to be killed, you cannot just defy an authoritarian state. You either do what they tell you or you get fucked. Or you do what they tell you, but then you have to live with the moral burden of having done something bad. But we think either way, you will be under a lot of scrutiny because as you climb up the ranks in an authoritarian state, especially if you're working for the government, because you have more information, you're under a lot more surveillance, a lot more scrutiny, which means that every day of your life, you have to be careful not to say the wrong thing, not to make any sort of commentary because you're likely under a lot of surveillance because you have more knowledge about public policy, about what the state wants to do. You have their private information of the state. So likely you're going to be targeted by the state. They're going to want to make sure very, very clearly why you are not infringing on anything. And that is going to be very difficult. Why? Because as I told you, you have a commitment to truth and to learning, which is something you can only properly pursue in a non-authoritarian state, which is why you want to flee overseas. So what is your life likely to look like overseas? So first of all, through the info side, we know that, researchers in your field already know of you. They've heard your name before. So you're not completely unknown. You're not building a career from scratch. Likely you already have some connections to academics on the outside because in most authoritarian states, they're not completely secluded like North Korea. Most of them look like China, Russia, where, people do Auslandssemester or people go to foreign countries to study for a bit. They do have access to some knowledge from the outside. So we think that you will likely be able to integrate yourself. Moreover, most academics know the English language, which means that you are likely going to have a very wide job market because most universities have English-speaking programs, et cetera, et cetera. We also think you will be intrinsically happier on principle because you are able to truly pursue the truth, right? You have access to all information, not just the specific information the authoritarian states wants you to have. So at that point, you will be happier because you will be making actual contributions to your field, et cetera, et cetera. I'll take a POI now. From closing.
Known locally obviously means within your country. More importantly, academics in authoritarian countries are just taught that the ideology of their country is the truth, which is why the Academy of China, for instance, isn't full of state agents.
Of course, the Academy of China isn't full of state agents, but at the point where you work for public policy, you become a state agent. So yes, we are talking about somebody who's being asked to become a state agent and have access to state knowledge. And yes, if you are known locally, that does not mean that the national government will care about you. So moving on, we also think that likely you may even be able to take your family with you because as we've said, in most situations, you're not necessarily fleeing. So you will have some people And again, we think you will already have connections in these countries, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, to summarize, our main case is that you as an actor, The only thing we can know about the actor for sure is the fact that they have a commitment to whatever they're studying, to their field, and as an academic, they have a commitment to learning more, to pursuing the truth. Thus, at the point where they cannot pursue the truth in an authoritarian state because it goes against the literal structure of an authoritarian state, which is to suppress, to only allow the truth to be known that is beneficial for the narrative of the authoritarian state or for their own improvement, and suppress information that does not support their truth and their narrative. We think that you're better on our side of the house because you will be intrinsically happier, you're likely to have a thriving good career, you're likely to get protection, and you do not have to live with the constant scrutiny of, oh, maybe today is the day that the authoritarian state will get my family, get my children, and murder them because I've said one wrong word. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the Leader of the Opposition for that fine speech, and now invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the government case. Hear, hear.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah, you can be heard.
Yeah, perfect. Just a second so I can put my timer on. Yeah, okay. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. No scientist, no matter how deeply they care about science and truth, will risk their own lives and their cared ones in order for to pursue the love of knowledge. Firstly, to acquire knowledge, you have to be alive or you have to have liberty, right? If the government is going to actively punish you because you rejected them and fled overseas, you are less likely to pursue academic interests in the way that you'd want as an academic that has already had a lot of resources and prestige locally. Secondly, to perform as an academic, you can't be constantly depressed or worried because your family are hostages, or because the government is behind you, or because you are being followed in the country that you have fled into. And thirdly, that presupposes entirely that you are going to completely fulfill the research on their side, right? If we prove that you are going to be a mediocre and a low-level scientist on the overseas that will probably get shitty funding if it gets anything at all, then their key interest is better on our side. Why is the well-being the most important thing for the actor? Widely more important than academic research. Firstly, it's basic human needs that need to be fulfilled first, right? Sleeping at night knowing that you are safe, being sure your family will be protected, guaranteeing that you have retirement funds, etc. Note that authoritarian regimes usually protect with lots of resources the upper echelons. It means bodyguards, generous salaries, government benefits in housing and finance. But they can be quite brutal if you get on their bad sides. They used to silence and imprison opposition. They actively can sabotage your life like they do with reporters, right? And in the most extreme cases, kidnapping, torture, and murder. You have lived in the country. You probably do know some of the horrors of a regime or how oppressive it is. We are not talking about an Ivy League scientist that has had a silver spoon up their ass their entire life. We are talking about a scientist that has seen what life is when you are not an academic, when you are not a professional, when you are someone that is pursued or on the bad side of the government. This is very likely that this person will prefer the seeking of truth over well-being in such a dire situation. These by themselves are harms that we ought to avoid no matter what, for two reasons. Firstly, they are deeply affecting impacts that cannot be reversed. When you get on the bad side of the regime, it's extremely hard to be accepted back because they feel that you can betray them. Authoritarian regimes depend on being very tight about sabotaging and spies. And secondly, they are not limited to you but your loved ones, significant others, family, friends, and colleagues. By betraying the regime, you are actively putting them at risk. Why does saying no and migrating actively portrays you as a traitor and scum in the eyes of the government? Firstly, you're going with their enemies and taking all they gave you, information and resources, to people they hate and despise. Secondly, not only you rejected the opportunity to help the government, but rather you're spitting on their faces, trying to help other governments that probably have sanctioned them or have opposed them on an international level. Thirdly, you're seen as a risk, and this is a crucial mechanism. You have crucial and unique information about the country, the level of education, the specific academic works that you have done locally. To give info to their enemies actively put them on a dangerous spot, right? For instance, even if you're not working with the government, just by being an academic, you do know how does uranium research work in the country, what nuclear fields are being studied nowadays, what new development techniques are being developed, or which universities and their specialties that are getting more funding. And this is information that is usually not publicly available, but you have it just for being an academic, right? Even in their best case, you are going to be a refugee. You are not a citizen. You cannot vote. You cannot acquire properties. You have lots of limitations in getting licenses, even to buy a fucking car, right? You're going to be significantly worse. What is a regime going to do? Or either threaten you in order to protect their interests. This looks like using your loved ones as hostages on their country. Or secondly, trying to coerce you to go back in the country, pressure you into coming back, actively sabotaging your image, or portraying you as someone responsible of the regime acting wrongdoings, right? Because the government can't do that, can't say, oh, Jorge Godos, he helped us commit genocides on the jungle of Peru, and you're now going to give them a refugee status. You'd better be putting them in jail or judging him for crimes against humanity or not giving him anything at all. Why is this more important for your academic results, and why is the comparative on truth that is being defended on upside better on our side? Firstly, you're going outside the country as an average human being that is above the average, but that is not enough, right? To get you millions in research, to give you a tenure position, to guarantee you a stable job in a top-level university. Note that the countries that opposition is framing as the possible targets, US, UK, somewhere in EU, there is already brutal competition for academic jobs. There are millions that are above average, and you not only are just another one, but you have active drawbacks that go against you. You have had some relationship with the authoritarian government to the extent they offered you a job. You have been a well-recognized academic locally without backlash. This means that you, at the very least, have been neutral or positive with the government actions. And there's a lot of distrust against you. Maybe you're a spy. Maybe you're using the funds to work in favor of that government. It is highly unlikely that you will access top-level universities that you can teach or get enough funding to correspond to the seeking of truth that opposition defends. Note that the comparative is miles better on OG. Firstly, I like to engage with CO.
Please, yes. Am I okay? Please note that if you don't know more than a normal spy that the liberal America can send, the regime won't care for you. Your burden is to explain why you know more than a spy. You never do so.
Yeah, I have already explained that. Academic research is key in these countries, right? Moreover, most authoritarian regimes depend on things like nuclear investigation. Most authoritarian regimes depend on physicists developing new weapons and new ways to protect the government, right? Or at least to compete in the arms race against the Western side. Just by being an academic and knowing how the academic field looks like, this makes you an active danger. Why is the comparative better on OG? Firstly, you're a key player in guaranteeing that the government works properly and applies good public policies. This means that there is going to be a massive incentive to fund you and give you access to everything you need in order to advance your academic success. Secondly, you have key information. They can mistreat you unless they want to risk stability. For the government, it's better to keep you closely than to alienate you and push you away, because you have information and you have worked with them if you accept the proposition. Thirdly, top-level academics are rare in these countries because there is not that much funding into academic investigation. If you're above average and well-respected inside, you're pretty much 1 in a million that deserves that funding, that deserves that help. And fourthly, you cannot be easily replaced. Extremely few academics know the crannies and nooks of the country. You have lived there for probably more than 30 years, have studied, have given lectures, have written papers on local reality. If they were to bring someone else, it would be significantly worse for the regime. If you buy the analysis that truth is important for the academic, the truth that they are going to get in on the other side is someone that a mediocre scientist is going to access, not what we propose.
We'd like to thank the DPM for that fine speech, and now invite the DLO to close off the top half. Hear, hear.
All right, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Great. Please put your PIs in the chat. Or, CG, you can also wave. I'll try and, yeah. All right. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Panel, first on the safety clash. I think this is clear on opening opposition. Why is that true? Look, what does it mean to advise a regime, right? It means to actively having to opt in and speak out on government policy. And that is incredibly dangerous when you live in an authoritarian regime in and of itself, right? Because it means that once you've taken a position, there will be other political powers that disagree with you, right? It means that at the point they become opposed to you, that they become aware of you in the first place. Because look, if you're a niche scientist in, I don't know, educational policy, probably like political powers were not like zooming in on you and what you do. But now, because you've taken a public stance that would influence what the public do, it means money, career, political power is being distributed based on your advice, you will be at scrutiny by other members of that government, right? It means that likely at the point where they are opposed to you, they are going to either try and limit your ability to work. They might want to try and influence you when that trying and influencing you has failed. They might even threaten you or your loved ones. It means that when people are opposed to you because you've spoken out on public policy, it means that you put a target on your and your loved ones' back. But note that this is likely to even happen when what you say is liked by the authorities. Because why? Because this can change in a heartbeat, right? Authoritarian regimes change their opinion all the time. So even if right now what you say is being reacted to with a thumbs up by the regime, that is unlikely to stay like this in the future. One, because change in leadership often happens. Sometimes different factions come into power. Sometimes it can just be the idea of, hey, look, sure, that made sense back then, but this thing has failed or whatever. Maybe we thought your idea was good, it didn't work, and now we're making you the scapegoat of this. That means that just at the point where you have positioned yourself at all politically, and that is known, that is what puts a target on your back, where sooner or later someone is going to strike. And that's the reason why, usually for their own safety, most academics in authoritarian regimes opt out entirely of commenting on government policy, because only a degree of anonymity protects you from authoritarian regime and authoritarian power struggles. And at the point where this is true, this is safer than being associated with the government at all. That means the safety clash is clearly on our side of the house, because you put not only a target on your back, but also on your loved one's back. And we think that that is likely to be different when you try and pursue a career overseas. Why is that likely to be true? Well, first of all, I think they are very likely to be able to leave, right? Look, it's not like the government, like the president came and said, hello, Mr. Scientist, please be my one and only public advisor, and I declare my love for you. No, what is most likely the case is, okay, they had a few people they scanned, you would be our favorite choice, but we also have this, and this. So you want to do it? Yes or no? Well, we'll see. I think that is the case. And probably these are also not nuclear scientists, right? Unless if this is no, probably not, right? It's probably like some social scientists that not public policy and not defense policy or nuclear policy. That means they're unlikely to have unique information that can hurt the regime, because it's not like state secrets are being handed out at university campuses, right? That means they are probably likely to be able to leave. One, because they probably have left the country before. Note that the info slide says, look, you have some respect overseas. And usually people overseas don't go around, hey, look at this scientist that never left their country. Let's take an interest in them. No, it's usually because, look, scientists go to conferences, talk to other people in their field, have email conversations. Mostly international scientists have also had study visits at other universities in other countries as well. Even authoritarian regimes try and do subsidies there, because it's oh, we can get information from them, we can foster relationships, whatever. That means you are likely to have some relationship with some people overseas anyway. Look, you're going to have your stands over there that are going to, if you reach out to them, likely and try and help you to get a career overseas. That means you end up being likely to get a career overseas as well, right? Because know that you only need some job. You don't need to have the most prestigious job in order for there to be a net benefit. You only need some job, because simply the fact of living in a liberal society allows you to, one, pursue your job better, because yes, you do have a principled idea of trying to care about the truth because you're a scientist, and you don't go there because you're Mr. Propaganda itself. You probably go there because you think, hey, what I do has value, and creating knowledge also has value, and that is what you care about. That means that you're only able to do that on our side of the house if you're in a liberal country, which you would do because you are overseas, which is the West, which is, I guess, somewhat liberal. That means that on our side of the house, even if you get a mediocre job somewhere, just because you don't need a lot of money to do social sciences, you need books and you need things to write on, whether that is paper, a typewriter, or a computer. That means you are likely to be able to continue your career if you go overseas at the point where you're likely able to leave, which I think we have proven to a reasonable degree. That means not only are you likely to be able to leave, usually people are able to also take their family to the place where they work, right? That means your closest circle, your kids, your wife or husband, you are likely to be able to take them with you, and they will also likely to be able to have a decent life over there, right? Because not only is it just better for children to grow up in a regime that's not authoritarian, because their actions don't meaningfully alter their future, where they say, they have said one thing out politically that will be put down in in like their acta, I don't know, like their file, right? Like my dad in the GDR, German Democratic Republic, he finished with, oh, he has the hallmarks of a socialist personality, which was bad because it didn't say he had the socialist personality, because in the youth group, he said, oh, I don't like this person, and that like was put in his file because you had like people all over there always watching it. It means that you know this as a scientist, you know, because you do get what is going on and the shit that's going down around you, and therefore you also want your children to try and have, if you have children or like just for yourself, just be happier and freer without the risk of, at the point where you speak up politically, having a target on your back. I think that is also a net benefit we're able to have. So not only pursuit of truth that is likely to be, but also pursuit of career and pursuit of personal happiness, which I guess every person cares about to some degree. Before I go on, closing government.
Most scientists in general subjects don't have such a delta in reputation between their own countries and the international academic community that this motion describes. You're likely to be a researcher in local areas who probably isn't in opposition of the regime and wants to have it.
No, what I think is likely to be true, usually these are people that have previously opted out and now are forced to being opted in, right? That is the delta that we're talking about here, because usually at the point where you have some recognition within your own scientific community and with the community abroad, you're likely to not be a government a regime hack, because usually then Western scientists are also not super keen to interact with you. So we're probably dealing with somebody that is politically trying to stay out of that shit in order to not put a target on their back. That means what opening opposition uniquely brings to you is the idea that A, on our side of the house, you're likely to be safer because you're safer not in an authoritarian regime. Accepting it would mean you would put a target on your back, not only endangering yourself, but likely also the people, the loved ones, because that is how like authoritarian governments operate. And what you're also likely to get is you are able to get a career overseas. You are likely able to leave the authoritarian regime. So at the end, you have a net positive in being able to pursue the truth, which you care about as a scientist, able to pursue personal happiness because you live in the USA where their motto is life, liberty, and happiness, and the people around you also access those benefits. So for all of those reasons, opening opposition.
We'd like to thank the DLO for that fine speech. Indeed, everyone for watching the great debate on top half. We'll now invite the member of government to begin the closing half of this debate. Hear, hear.
All right, happy to see you all. Okay, just a second. All right, so I'll start. Oh, POIs in chat, only in chat, and you can start suggesting them from about 5 minutes because I just won't take them before that, but you can write before if you want. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Rebuttals will be integrated. I'll have 2 main points in this debate. Firstly, about academic self-fulfillment. Secondly, about why you really want to do good for your country and you see that as something that will do good. Let's start with academic self-fulfillment, because OG runs this extreme case about nuclear scientists and how like you will be like Rasta or something like that. We think our characterization is much more realistic. Firstly, they want you to be an advisor of public policy. This means that the relevant professions are something like architecture, economics, political science, law and lawmaking, things like that, where you can actually influence public policy and not like nuclear science. In this case, if you have some respect overseas, it is probably because of research you've committed before in one of those fields. Notice that those fields are uniquely fields that are practiced locally. And this is important. Why do we think this is the case? Firstly, we think that those fields are highly local. There are specific laws in specific countries. Being a lawyer in Israel is completely different than being a lawyer in the United States. Secondly, specifically, there are certain types of like things that you study in your country because you grew up there. For example, in Israel, we have kibbutzim. If you're an architect, you will study that for like most certainty. This means that your study was local before. But secondly, we think if you are the best in the world, you're probably not in this motion, right? Because if you were one of the best in the motion, the info slide says you are not the best in the motion. You are like recognized somehow in the world, but you are the best locally. This means that you are famous locally because things that you've done that are specifically good for the local population, for people inside of your country that are interesting to people inside of the country that they can actually think about, etc. If it was as interesting for the whole world, they would probably take you earlier, you would study abroad, anything like that. And so we think your research is probably very local oriented, and so we think has to do with the country itself. This means several very important things. Firstly, it says that in another place you will simply be much worse. Why? Because you will have much less access to the ability to actually study those things, less ability to cooperate with other people, less access to archives, less ability to actually practice those things. For example, to practice public policy that is specific to Israel and see how in Israel it actually works. This means that your research would be much worse. Secondly, we think you will get less recognition, less networking, which is crucial in academics because you need to create this networking in order to work with other people. Notice that the researchers around you would see you as someone that chose to leave, chose to not be as effective as he can, and so your reputation will deteriorate overall. In the comparative, we think that you even advance yourself more inside of the country, you succeed yourself. But secondly, and this is more important, you actually see your ideas coming into practice. And we think this is extremely important for fields like economics, when you actually have to commit like studies and advise and see how it works in the real world. We think because of that, you get the unique chance of actually studying and trying to see that your things you're talking about are actually coming into realization. And we think this is extremely important for you as someone that dedicated their whole life into truth, like tried to claim. Secondly, the fact that you want to do so because of that, we say you get so much self-fulfillment, and we say this is just good for you, like in the sense that you now feel more respect and feel better fulfilled, you get much more happiness. Secondly, you want to do good for your country. Now OG said, oh, you are not a debater, you're not from Ivy League. They never analyzed why this is the truth. Oh said, oh, the pursuit of truth is the most important thing. Why do you feel like helping your country is your mission? Firstly, you grew up in this country. This means that you learned through the education system the logic of the regime, the things the regime cares about. You were indoctrinated into thinking, like, for example, that being a communist is a good thing because this is how we are all united, etc. Secondly, you were chosen by the government and the regime. Notice that they wouldn't choose you if they would think that you possess an active threat to the things they're saying. So you will be like, you won't be helpful for them. This means that your research is somehow in accordance with their policy, generally speaking. This means that you don't see them as bad, you see them as good, and you see their missions and the things they aim for as something that is actually good and helping everyone. Moreover, you see that as your own mission, trying to help them, trying to help the whole population to just be better. What does this mean? Firstly, we think that you feel commitment to your country. By being the one chosen, you already feel kind of the commitment of you being chosen, not other people. But secondly, you got the education system. You got many like things from your country, your education, your basic infrastructure, all the things like your family you got by being in this government, in this state or country. This means that you love your country most certainly, and what you want to give back, if not for the government itself, for the people around you. You want to do good for them. But secondly, you think that if you won't do that, someone else will do that and maybe do that worse than you. This is because you actually believe in your research, you believe that you are right, and so you think helping this research come into place and actually affecting things is the best thing you can do for your family and the people you care about. Before I continue, I'd love POI from opening. Yes.
Look, being oppressed by an authoritarian regime is usually not something that instills patriotism and love for your country. Don't you think that the negative experiences you've accumulated throughout your life are likely to have made you dislike your country rather than like it?
We just don't think this is the case. Like I analyzed, we think that if they chose you, you weren't oppressed. You are someone that their research, the things you've done throughout your life is in accordance with that, with what the regime wants you to think. This means that you are probably very privileged inside of this country. You were brought up in good schools. You were indoctrinated in the thinking. This is what the research should be, should look like, should say in the real world. They wouldn't choose you otherwise. This means that you are a very privileged person inside of the regime. You are connected to the government, and so they wouldn't, because otherwise you won't be chosen. So you have some connections, and you would benefit most certainly from implementing the policies you think are right. And so we think this is just a logical thing to do. Moreover, we think that your close environment, your family, your friends who you care about would be very disappointed from you not taking this opportunity, because they see that as a good thing thing, because as we said, being close to the regime is something that gives you power and gives you connections. And so we think for them, if you will betray them, they will feel very uncertain and not sure why have you done that. Notice, our case is not as extreme as OG. We don't have to prove that you will be killed if you won't get this option. We just say this is much better for you, for your self-fulfillment and for your helping your family, and so we call you to propose.
We'd like to thank the member of government for that fine speech. Now invite the member of the opposition to begin the CO case. Here.
Hi, am I both visible and audible?
Yes to both.
Thank you. I will ask for a POI around the first minute. Otherwise, please don't interrupt me. Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. 2 arguments that you're going to hear from side closing opposition. The first one about how this puts him in a very dangerous situation, but the second one about how you'll actively feel horrible to contributing to the regime in your day-to-day life. Very proud to oppose. 2 things before that in framing. Firstly, why that person probably does not care so much about change, why he isn't a patriot, etc. Firstly, nobody, it is written that he's a patriot, meaning that firstly, we cannot presume that because on aggregate, the chance of him being a patriot is very small. But secondly, he has reputation overseas, meaning that he has made some effort throughout the years in order to build it, meaning that he was thinking about having other alternatives rather than his country. But secondly, he's an academic, which means he has probably put in a lot of effort in order to become smart and successful. But lastly, even if the state has tried to make him a patriot, we think in the moment in which he's an academic, he's smart, therefore he wouldn't get fooled. He was just proposed that, meaning that the regime isn't going to kill him if he denies that position. If they wanted him so badly, they wouldn't have given him a choice, but OG is saying that the regime can kill him, which again shows how dangerous it probably is for him. But secondly, what is that regime? We think that it is very exploitative. Why is that the case? The regimes are something that are generally something that is very fragile, meaning that for them it is hard to maintain themselves, therefore they need to have a lot of rules in order for them to be maintained. But secondly, it isn't based on giving people's funds. They are not paying them fair wage, etc., which means they simply want the money for themselves, meaning that that person is probably even going to get underpaid, which means he cannot expect a lot from that position. Argument number 1 about how this puts him in a dangerous situation. And let's make the comparison with OO really fastly. OO's case relies on you having morality and simply doing things that are against your will because you choose to do so on a conscious level. We are going to give you the case in which it does not matter what kind of opinion you give to the authoritarian regimes, and it is still dangerous for you. Firstly, it is dangerous in the moment in which you will inevitably screw up in your job with one of your opinions, with one of the things that you say on TV. We aren't even talking about this reaching the general public, as OO is saying. We are simply saying that the regime is fanatic. The dictators are fanatic, meaning that they wouldn't have made the regime if they weren't, therefore they would be very mad at you for saying even basic things. But secondly, this means that you're simply going to be involved with far more dangerous people that are wanting to have an incentive to end your life in a moment in which you become, I don't know, a bit too outspoken for the regime, even if that simply was not your intention. But even if we take the worst case for us, in which you aren't killed, we think that you're simply going to be exploited. Why is that the case? Because those regimes are highly irrational, meaning that they simply have a God complex, right? They always think that they're right, meaning that they're firstly paranoid, which means that they will simply, again, want to kill you. The dictator takes the decisions single-handedly, which means that it will simply take one person to say your verdict. It will take one person to want to say, okay, he's going to jail, okay, he's going to get tortured, etc. It only takes for him to be in a bad mood for one day for you to have your life ended. But see, they simply don't value you. They don't value anybody but themselves, meaning that you're highly replaceable for several reasons. The first one is simply that they can get I don't know, an academic from another country, right? They can get somebody from China. Or secondly, they can simply get somebody else that is less, that is new to the scene, that is far more appropriate, that isn't going to fulfill their duty, because notice that that person wasn't probably hired to be an advisor, in the literal sense of the word, but I'm later going to explain this. But notice that if he wanted, for him to make the decisions alone, he would simply have hired you in an attempt to seem more legit, like in front of his people, in front of other countries, right? So what is the bottom line of this? Notice that in a moment in which you're highly replaceable, firstly, the dictators have the absolute ability to lie about having killed you, but secondly, they probably didn't hire you in the first place to give advice, but rather for you just to stand as a figure there, like explaining their motives and making them seem more legitimate. But thirdly, notice that you do not have any kind of leverage over that person whatsoever, because firstly, he can make those decisions alone, but secondly, he can hire anybody else. What does this mean? This means that you simply cannot say that you can't say that he won't work for him anymore. This is an irreversible decision. Now you have the opportunity to deny them without having any harm, or at least the least amount of harm. In the moment in which you accept that job, that is an irreversible decision, meaning that you put yourself in front of more and more danger every single day. But fourthly, why is it the worst thing for him to die? I think that firstly, he has potential. He wants to fulfill it. It would be such a waste of his abilities and life as a human being. But secondly, he has dreams, which means that he wants to be able to develop and not have a limit on his decision making, etc. But lastly, it is just an irreversible decision. Before continuing, OG.
So far your case is highly speculative. If you prove that the scientist has potential, it is unlikely that he's going to fuck up so hard that the government is going to kill you, right? That is not proven right now.
No, we are not saying that he's look, that is a differentiation. We are saying you have so much time that you are spending with that dictator who is so I don't know, who is so paranoid, who is so delusional, who is so full of his God complex. This isn't something that we need to prove. Therefore, in a moment in which he simply is in a bad mood and he didn't probably want you in the first place, but just needed you for representative functions, he's far more likely to think about every single little thing that you have said, about every single little word that you have used, right? Those people aren't rational, which means that on aggregate, you have a very big chance of simply saying the bad thing. But third argument, I think that you will simply feel horrible. Notice, second argument, notice this does not depend on whether he's a patriot or not. This depends on him having deeper knowledge about the things that the regime is doing for people, the internal deals that you otherwise wouldn't have known that existed. What are those horrible things that are happening? This looks like people being tortured, seeing graphic images of people being hurt, etc. Now you know more about them. As a normal person, you probably would have access to some kind of information, but now you know that those things are happening far more explicitly. But why does this leave such a deep imprint on your mind? Firstly, you didn't expect to get that information, meaning that you will feel very bad about this. You don't know how to react to such grotesque things, meaning that you actively feel horrible for even knowing about this. But secondly, you feel like you're a part of the problem and like you are passively contributing to the thousands of people that are dying. For all those reasons, CO.
We'd like to thank the MO for that fine speech and now invite the GW to close off the Gov bench. Here.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yeah, you can be heard.
3 rounds of CG really do take a mental toll on you. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1, and look, I wanted to start the speech with a joke about me potentially pursuing an academic career in Israel and how this motion is relevant to me. But it really isn't. Because number one, I am in computer science, as in there will never be a situation where I will be preferred locally and have a local reputation over non-local reputation, because all of my papers are going to be in English and everyone abroad are going to read them and I will come to conferences as OOC. So computer science is not the relevant thing in the debate. But secondly, I will never be an academic within dictatorial Israel because I will either leave or the state which apparently surveys me as per OO and CO is going to catch me far before I develop a strong local reputation. And really, I can only succeed as a collaborator. I will do some characterization on 3 topics. Number 1, as how do authoritarian states actually look like and act. Number 2, what do I do as an academic? Number 3, am I a supporter of the regime or not? And then show to you why this wins the entire debate. Let us first of all begin on how the authoritarian regimes look. Look, a lot of things in the debate essentially tell you that authoritarian regimes look like 1984 without any explanation behind it. As in that if you're an enemy of the state, you will immediately get shot, you will immediately get killed, and that the state does not tolerate anyone disagreeing with it on any certain level. Here's why: so long as you learn to the state is unlikely to kill you, even if you fuck up or whatever. 2 reasons. Number 1, simply backlash. As in, the people who are likely the most to revolt are people who actively know that they're going to be killed, right? Because if I just know that I will be, for example, demoted, fired, will be led to lower results, then I actually have a large risk when I want to organize a revolt or oppose the state and all of that. Comparatively, when I know that the state is doing purges on everyone who disagrees with it, I have far more of an ability far more of an interest in order to actually resist it. Most authoritarian regimes fall from within, right? Internal coups, such as happened in the Soviet Union, such as what killed the first imperial dynasty of Qin when a captain soldier revolted against it, and many other historical examples. People know of that and know that they don't want to fuck up in the terms of treating, and the authoritarian regimes know that and know that they don't want to fuck up when they are treating outwardly. But secondly, it's very simply the fact that when I am killing other people, that can also be turned on me. Not which tell you, authoritarian regimes are actually replaced, the governments are replaced very quickly. Everyone in the authoritarian regimes know that, and they know that if they start killing people, they will be killed when the government is likely replaced back on them. This is why everyone has an interest in order to create a social contract and within the regime, whereas you are not killed, but rather demoted to a lower position, or simply put under house arrest or far easier stuff. No, I think that no team in this debate analyzed otherwise why they're actually likely to kill, which is why you can do this counterweighing as why most cases in this debate are very, very, very weird. And objectively, historically, factually, when you look at, for example, Soviet leaders or Chinese statesmen who have been reduced or lost the favor of the state, they have been demoted and not completely removed. For example, Xi Jinping's father was lost like a Chinese hierarchy, and then wasn't killed, just moved to a faraway farm and all of that. This completely outweighs most security cases, both from OGO or NCO, who decide to want this as their main case. But let's also talk about the fact this academic actually is. 2 levels on that. Number 1, the academic is likely to be a local academic, specifically on the local topic. Yael already explains to you, this is very intuitive, right? Because if I am, for example, researching computer science or math or something which is generalized, I'm unlikely to, as per the info slide, get a lot of local reputation, but not international reputation, when all of these fields are internationalized in the first place. This tell you, but you probably did have some Western work in order to get some Western reputation or like overseas reputation. But know that even being a local academic grants you a level of international reputation, just not a big one. For example, academics looking into China get invaluable insight from inter-Chinese academics about the Chinese economy and all of that. It isn't just moderate reputation of the greatest researchers within China. So this exactly conforms to the motion, while you being an academic in an international field does not do so. So you're likely a local academic and local researcher. But also, seriously, you're likely to be a supporter of the regime. OGs say that, but never actually explain to you why, wherein Yael actually fucking does so, and directly explains to you why you're likely to be relatively privileged, not unless you were researched by the school, you got into donation from H0 on all of that, and you're likely to get into that. Say, but you care about the proof, and say, you're smart. This is such naive arguments, as if authoritarian regimes don't have any way to justify their own motives. You get told from the moment that you enter school that this is the truth. You get to know cooked up data from the authoritarian regime. Probably even when you start working there, a lot of internal data is falsified in order to make the leaders feel good. For example, the Chinese people will just falsify their GDP or falsify data in the Uyghurs being killed. Internal Chinese data simply oftentimes do not show that. In addition, you get stuck within huge echo chambers of everyone telling you, yes, support me. Please, importantly at that point, you just think that the truth is the regime. But know that OO concedes to this framing internally when they tell to you, but you're constantly being surveyed, you're constantly being checked up and all of that, probably means that you couldn't have become a very well-known local academic without you being surveyed and checked that you support the regime in the first place. Why does this be essentially the entire debate? On OG, the security argument was already weighed against, and the argument of you having a better career on a vaccine is actually the less relevant because by the motion you already have a pretty good career. Yael explains to you uniquely why you working with the regime is what you want for the next step in the career. As in, you actually get your policy into place, you actually feel like you're helping people uniquely because you're not simply an academic and theoretical research. This actually uniquely explains why your career is getting better and not just you getting more funding, which is quite symmetrical at the point at which you're strong. Before we continue to OO, let's take OO.
Look, at the point where you're known and respected overseas, that must mean that the knowledge you create is of some value to people overseas. So it probably won't be just a local niche subject that you do, but something that is transferable and cross-applicable elsewhere.
You have some respect overseas. This is entirely workable with, for example, a very a good academic in Chinese studies who has some respect overseas, because other people from overseas who care about Chinese study see him and somewhat respect him, not generally speaking. So on OO, know that this before a lot of the argument about truth and all of that. Initially, know that this before that all of the argument why you're going to move and get a better job, all of the fall at the point which you understand that you're a local academic. So you need the best access to local data, local material. You're likely to lose that when you are going to live and have a huge gap that you need to fulfill in terms of you learning locally, and most of OO's case fall. Lastly, CO who run a worse version of OO's case. They say the leader has a God complex. I do not know why the leader has a God complex. This is completely irrational. I think that for you to become a leader of an authoritarian state, you need to be relatively smart. You can't be just complete loser who makes irrational decisions, because that would mean that you would fall quite quickly. People would rise up against you, and the more rational people within the regime would replace you. But then, oh, what if I fuck up? I don't know. You're probably a very competent scientist, right? You're unlikely to fuck up when you establish so much respect to be so terrible in your field. But additionally, so even if you fuck up, so what? Authoritarian regimes don't instantly punish you for every single time that you're wrong. They're talking about you like some sort of a dictator from a movie, right? From a cartoon, who just kills all of the subjects like they're nothing. Look, please treat authoritarian regimes with respect. They suck, yes, but they're not that terrible. They're not that stupid. And you, to become an academic in that position, you are likely to support them and want to work for the regime. As Yael has explained, we think that this is enough to win from CG this debate. Very positive. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the government whip for that fine speech, and now invite the opposition whip to close off the debate as a whole. Hear, hear.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, so just a second, set up a time and organize my notes. Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1, start. Dear panel, we present a very simple case in this debate, which is that firstly, you have zero leverage over this person, which was never rebutted during the whole debate on how, like, you can just hire another person from another country if he's too problematic or if he's wanting too much money, on how you can just, like, replace it with another scientist from your local country. These are mechanisms we give in first speech. Things that were never rebutted throughout this whole debate. At the point at which you're very replaceable, we say that you don't have any power, no leverage. You can't ask for more money. You can't ask to learn more stuff. This means that your life in the, even if you have a life in that country, which is our second extension, your life will suck because you don't have absolutely anything in the regime, because you don't have any power over it. But secondly, this is a decision you can't reverse. You can't just see how bad it is to be an advisor and just go back to, like, going overseas in this sort of way, which means that you're stuck in this horrible life condition throughout your whole life. First extension. And the second extension is that we give better mechanisms as to why the regime is likely to kill you than opening opposition. Now, why are our mechanisms better than opening opposition? First thing, notice all of their mechanism relies on people being, like, firstly being asked to do immoral stuff as advisors, which they never prove. You can just ask for advice, for example. But secondly, notice we are also better because, like, their case relies on you, like, being the dictatorship being very, like, you having a lot of morals, you not liking the dictatorship, you knowing what's right, what's wrong. These are things that their case relies on, which means that it doesn't happen 100% of the time that you are killed, or it doesn't happen that often that you are killed in this sort of way. What is our case? Our mechanisms are better because at the point at which everybody is a human being, so, like, everybody can make some sort of mistake with their policy, especially having in mind that everybody agrees that this person isn't the best at doing this sort of jobs in this sort of way. At the point at which you make a mistake, you're going to be killed. And this is something that you're inevitably going to do at some point. And to explain, you're going to be killed because the dictator is irrational. Even if it is the best possible decision for him to keep you alive, he will think that, for example, you're sabotaging the regime in this sort of way. He will think that you want to screw him specifically in this sort of way. Because notice, the dictator is paranoid and he has God complex. To explain this, he has God complex because he has been ruling an incredibly big country for the whole of his life. This means that he believes he's God. He's the best person who has ever walked dirt in this sort of way. At that point, notice, going to be killed. And this is what we prove is inevitably going to happen to your life. But if not killed, exploited, and have zero money. Proud to oppose. Okay, notice having in mind I've already done the comparative with opening opposition as to why our mechanisms are better than theirs, let's continue with rebuttal. First, opening government. They tell us, you have declined the offer of the regime, so the regime is now really mad at you and wants to kill you. Notice, you just manipulate them. You're going to say to them that you want more experience and that's why I'm going overseas. Or you're going to tell them that you don't feel prepared to do this job in this sort of way. You're very smart. You're an academic. You can manipulate them. But secondly, the country doesn't really care that much about you because it has limited resources and has many other different priorities in this sort of way. At the point at which the country wants to control the people on the inside, has to do outside trading, and it's a small country, they don't care for a little scientist in this sort of way. And then they tell us this big point, which is, oh, they have information about the country. Notice first intuition pump. We know what is happening in China. We know this sort of stuff, even without there being scientists. But on a mechanism level, notice the liberal world already has spies and spy drones. The dictatorships know this. At that point, what does this mean? They aren't likely to send anybody to kill this person because that's a waste of resources, because the liberal world is already going to know that. But secondly, notice, the liberal world doesn't care about the education and the academics of this sort of countries. They never prove why they care, and this is their unique mechanism. They don't care at all. I can guess that the people in China are poor. I can get that information from my spies. I can guess that they're uneducated. This is very intuitive. They never prove this. But like Turkey, you don't know, you as the scientists don't know what the regime is working on. You don't know this sort of things, because at the point which you don't know what the regime is working on, because you're just a normal scientist, you don't work for the government, the most valuable information is something that you don't know. So the regime has limited resources and has zero incentive to waste these resources to catch you and kill you in this sort of way. At that point, we prove that more effectively than they prove that, and this is the most important flashpoint, because that is irreversible in this sort of way. You can't do anything after you have died in this way. But like, secondly, everything is a precondition. Like, loving your country is a precondition of you being alive. Being good at academics, you can't be good at academics if you're dead in this way. So this is the most important thing in this debate. Okay, notice. Let's go to CG. CG tell us a few things. They tell us this is local, so we won't be good overseas. Notice, the basic ideas are the same. Like, they have the same concepts. This is good for economy, this is bad for economy. These are very simple in this way. It's very intuitive. But secondly, it has originated from the same place. Like, obviously, the material is going to be very similar. But secondly, you can learn new things a lot faster than normal people, because we've already learned the basic stuff in this way. Okay, POI.
Even in that clash, it is still unclear how you are going to get funding, research in top universities if you are at most above average, right? Compared to elite scientists that are already common in this first world country.
This doesn't really matter because you're dead. Okay, let's continue to the other points in this way. Notice, they tell us he cares for his country, so he believes in betraying the regime in this way. Notice, if he's smart, he knows that it is best for his country in this way to go out of the regime. This is presuming he cares for his country. It is best for his country to go outside of the regime and try to change it because it's bad in this way. So like at that point, he most probably knows this if he's smart, so this doesn't really work. But secondly, he's smart. If he's smart, he doesn't fall for all the propaganda you talk about, because propaganda is made for the common person who is uneducated in these dictatorships and authoritarian regimes. So he won't fall for it because he's smart, and the propaganda is made for not smart people. But thirdly, if I know stuff about the economy, I can see all the problems, so I don't like my country. But okay, notice that they give a few responses to us. No, the regime isn't dumb. Notice, we prove the regime is irrational. The dictator is irrational. But notice, killing one person can be hidden very easily. They say, oh, it causes backlash. Killing one person can be hidden really easy. You can say it's an accident at work. You can do all that sort of stuff, and people won't question because you're the regime, you control the media. So at that point, we'll win the most important flashpoint, so we win this debate. Vote for us.
We'd like to thank the Whip for that fine speech. Indeed, everyone for a great debate. We're going to deliberate now. Obviously, you'll find the results at the end of the day. But congratulations again at making the ESL final. And I hope you all have a lovely day.